This is Diana Sullivan, and I have a new pattern today. This striking dragon scarf is great to knit with self-striping or scrappy yarn. It has really interesting and useful techniques. It has an I-cord cast on, automatic wrap short row triangles, a row with 2 tensions, and decreasing multiple stitches easily and beautifully. The deep textures here were created by flipping the work, which can be done with a garter bar or waist knitting. This pattern is available standard gauge or mid gauge or bulky gauge, and it's a digital download available at www.dianaknits.com. It comes with a step-by-step video with all the techniques. Here on YouTube, though, I'm doing short demos for some useful techniques included in the scarf. After making a triangle on the dragon shawl, my next step is to flip all the knitting over. It can be done with the garter bar, or it can be done with waste yarn. And I'm going to do it with waste yarn right now, just to show how that's done. Now, I have some needles over here that are empty because I bound those off at the end of the triangle. I'm just going to leave them out in hold position. My carriage is set to not knit them, so it will leave these needles in hold position alone. I'm going to unthread my carriage. I'm taking the yarn out of it. So here's the yarn out of that carriage, and I'm going to take it under the carriage and under the end of the knitting machine, so it's not going to be bothered by the carriage. Now I need a contrasting waste yarn, and I have some. It's a light colored yarn in the same weight. I'm going to do about 5 rows of waste yarn so that I can flip this work without having a garter bar. Now that I've done some rows of waist knitting, I'm going to turn the work over and rehang it. So I'm cutting the waist yarn, and I need to remove my hardware. I like to use weights all along these, but since I'm not using a garter bar, I didn't need a lot of weight. I'm using an LK150 comb. It works really well for this. And I'm also going to demonstrate how to do this with a Chris Crafter garter bar. But I'm recommending, if you have any trouble at all flipping stitches with a garter bar, just do this little waste yarn method. You'll be surprised. It doesn't take that long to do. And what I'm going to do at this point is take the stitches off the machine, and I can do that by just running the carriage over them. So they're off, and they're curled up in my hand. I'll just put them in my lap for a minute. I'm going to put the carriage back on the left-hand side, and now I'm going to rehang the knitting. Now, to save time on this, I have a cut credit card. I'm going to slide along all these needles and work and just make sure they're open. Now that the knitting is off and it's in my lap, and I have all these needles and work that the knitting is going to go on, I am going to hang the triangle back on. Now, I am going to turn the triangle so that the knit side, this side right here, is facing me, and the waste yarn will naturally curl toward me. And I get myself a tool and hang these stitches. Now, if you use waste yarn with a good contrast, you can easily see what to hang. The thing to hang, in my case, are these yellow loops that are in between all this pinkish, pale pinkish waste yarn. So I put a loop on each of the needles using a transfer tool. After I get the first couple on, I can speed this up a little. I'm using 2 at once. It's just really pretty easy to get 2 and put them down at the same time. We have a lot of flips in this scarf. That is a big part of the charm of the scarf. And it does take some time to flip the stitches and get that Quaker stitches. After all my stitches are rehung, one of the things that I like to do is unravel this waste yarn. I'm pretty thrifty. I will use this waste yarn again. And so I just unravel it, and I can see by unraveling it whether I picked up every stitch. I also check, of course, that I have a loop to put on every needle. This kind of picking up, you should have a loop for every needle. Alright, so I have my waste yarn out, and I can just push my needles back and just look things over, and it looks really good. So I have all my stitches flipped over. I wouldn't make garter stitch this way, but it's very practical for this scarf because, after all, this scarf has quite a few flips, but not nearly so many as if I were doing garter stitch. And I'm also going to show how to do this using a Chris Crafter garter bar. But whatever garter bar that you might use, practice it before you get involved in the project, and then you'll be really confident that you can actually flip the work well. And at the end of a flip, in particular, I like to put a comb back on. I have spread one end of my finished scarf on the knitting machine, which has a towel over it now, because I wanted you to see how these flips look when they're done. The one that I showed in the video was this flip, this first one on the scarf. And as you can see, as it lies here, this is purl. And then the next triangle's knit, and the next triangle's purl, and then knit, and then purl, and so forth. And what happens is the natural roll of the fabric gives us these really prominent texture lines between the knits and the purls. The purls, which are curling this way, under, stick up this way, and then the knits want to cup in this direction. So it's really an interesting look to my dragon scarf, and you will need to flip once for each triangle. Not a bad job, even doing it with waste yarn. Now, if you like this content and find it useful and practical, please do hit like and subscribe. I'm hoping that YouTube will let a lot more non-machine knitters, regular knitters, and others see our interesting machines and what we're able to do with them. See you next time.